There exists within the depths of human psychology a phenomenon both ancient and enduring, one that speaks to the very heart of what it means to live authentically in a world that often feels its own reflection. You have witnessed this, perhaps experienced it firsthand, the curious magnetism between those who radiate genuine presence and those whose souls harbor an inexplicable hostility towards such luminosity. Why does the person who feels most authentically often become the target of subtle but persistent animosity? Why do those who embody emotional truth find themselves surrounded by individuals who simultaneously seek their warmth, yet unconsciously work to diminish it? This is not mere social dynamics at play, but rather a manifestation of what I have observed as the fundamental tension between the conscious mind and the collective unconscious. The transcendent function and recognition effect. The empathic individual serves as more than simply someone with heightened sensitivity. They function as a living conduit for what I term the transcendent function, the bridge between the conscious and unconscious realms of human experience. When such a person enters a space, they carry with them an invisible field of awareness that penetrates beyond surface pleasantries into the hidden chambers of the psyche. This penetrating quality of authentic presence creates what we might call the recognition effect. Others, whether they realize it consciously or not, find themselves suddenly aware of their own emotional masks, their carefully constructed personas, the defended territories of the heart. The empath's natural state of openness becomes a mirror that reflects not only what people show the world, but what they hide from themselves. Consider the ancient myth of Pandora's box, but inverted. Rather than releasing chaos into the world, the empathic presence inadvertently opens the sealed containers within other souls, revealing hopes long buried, wounds carefully bandaged, dreams abandoned in the name of practicality. This revelation, though potentially healing, often feels like an invasion to those unprepared for such exposure. The shadows, protective response dash. The resentment that emerges from this dynamic stems from what I have identified as the shadow's protective response. When confronted with someone who embodies the very qualities they have rejected within themselves, emotional honesty, vulnerability, intuitive wisdom, the observer experiences what Jung called the activation of the opposite. Their psyche, in an attempt to maintain its current equilibrium, generates resistance against this threatening authenticity. You see, the empathic individual represents a living challenge to the carefully maintained illusions that many people require to function in modern society. Their very existence poses uncomfortable questions. Why have I built these walls? What am I so afraid of feeling? When did I decide that emotional truth was dangerous? Rather than face these inquiries, the unconscious mind often chooses to project its discomfort outward, transforming internal conflict into external blame. This projection manifests in countless subtle ways. The empath may find themselves described as too sensitive, overly emotional, or trying too hard to be different. These labels serve a dual purpose. They dismiss the threatening authenticity, while simultaneously allowing the critic to avoid examining their own emotional numbness or inauthenticity. Luminosity envy and the moth and flame paradox. There is also the phenomenon of what I call luminosity envy. Deep within the human psyche exists an archetype I have observed repeatedly, the image of the radiant child, the undefended soul, the one who dares to feel and express without shame. This archetype represents our original wholeness, the state we inhabited before learning to fragment ourselves for survival or social acceptance. When people encounter an empathic individual, they're confronted with a living embodiment of this archetype. Part of them feels immediate recognition and longing, a desperate desire to return to that state of emotional freedom. Yet another part, the part that has invested years in building protective barriers, experiences this encounter as a threat to its entire infrastructure of safety. This creates what we might term the moth and flame paradox. The resentful individual is simultaneously drawn to the empath's light and compelled to extinguish it. They want to possess the empath's emotional freedom without doing the inner work required to reclaim their own authenticity. They seek to absorb the empath's energy rather than cultivate their own inner fire. Dreams often reveal this dynamic through powerful symbolic imagery. I have encountered numerous patients who dream of encountering a luminous figure, sometimes a wise child, sometimes a radiant stranger, who fills them with both wonder and inexplicable anger. Upon analysis, these dreams typically reveal the dreamer's own split relationship with their emotional nature, their simultaneous yearning for and fear of their own depth, the dimming response, and its tragedy. The empathic individual, unaware of these unconscious dynamics, often personalizes the hostility they encounter. They may begin to question their own worth, wondering why their genuine attempts at connection are met with subtle sabotage or emotional coldness. They fail to recognize that they are not being rejected for who they are, but rather for what they represent in the psyche of the other. This personalization leads many empaths into what I call the dimming response, a gradual withdrawal of their natural radiance in an attempt to make others more comfortable. They begin to speak less authentically, feel less openly, shine less brightly. This adaptation, while seemingly practical, represents a form of psychological suicide, a betrayal of their essential nature to appease the unhealed wounds of others. The tragedy of the dimming response is that it serves no one. The empaths lose connection to their authentic self, while those who resented their light never receive the genuine healing that witnessing authentic emotional courage might have provided. Instead of transformation, everyone settles for a diminished version of potential human connection, healer's magnetism and vicarious shame. But why do empaths seem particularly susceptible to attracting these challenging dynamics? The answer lies in understanding what I call the healer's magnetism. Those who have developed exceptional emotional sensitivity have typically done so through their own journey of pain and transformation. They carry within themselves the archetype of the wounded healer, one who has descended into their own darkness and emerged with wisdom. This archetypal energy is recognizable at unconscious levels. People sense, without necessarily understanding why, that the empath possesses something they lack. Perhaps emotional literacy, perhaps the courage to feel deeply, perhaps the ability to remain open despite having been hurt. This recognition creates a complex attraction that often includes both genuine admiration and hidden resentment. The resentment often stems from what I observe as vicarious shame. When people encounter someone who has clearly done their emotional work, who has faced their shadows and integrated their pain into wisdom, they may feel ashamed of their own avoidance, their own emotional cowardice, their own unwillingness to undertake such inner work. Rather than use this shame as motivation for growth, they often transform it into criticism of the very person whose courage triggered their self-awareness. Rescue magnetism and the authenticity mirror effect. Furthermore, empaths often carry what we might call rescue magnetism, an unconscious signal that attracts those seeking to avoid responsibility for their own healing. The empath's natural compassion and desire to help can become a beacon for individuals who prefer to remain dependent rather than develop their own emotional competence. These individuals may resent the very person they rely upon, experiencing their dependence as humiliation rather than gratitude. This dynamic is further complicated by what I term the authenticity mirror effect. Empaths, by their very nature, tend to respond genuinely to situations rather than strategically. Their reactions are typically honest reflections of their inner state, rather than calculated responses designed to manipulate outcomes. This authenticity serves as a constant mirror, showing others the difference between genuine response and social performance. For individuals whose entire social identity is built upon performance and image management, this mirroring can feel deeply threatening. The empath's authenticity highlights their own inauthenticity, their own emotional dishonesty, their own distance from their true self. The natural response is often to attack the mirror rather than examine what it reflects. Projection and energy. Vampirism. Consider the psychological concept of projection, the tendency to attribute our own unconscious qualities to others. Those who secretly resent empaths are often projecting their own disowned sensitivity, their own suppressed emotional depth, their own abandoned capacity for authentic feeling. The empath becomes a repository for all the qualities they judge within themselves but cannot bear to own. This projection serves a protective function, allowing individuals to maintain their psychological defenses while simultaneously expressing their disowned aspects through criticism of others. They can remain emotionally defended while attacking emotional openness in the empath. They can stay disconnected while condemning the empath's connection. They can remain inauthentic while criticizing the empath's genuineness. The phenomenon becomes even more complex when we consider the role of what I call energy vampirism, the unconscious tendency of some individuals to drain the vitality of others rather than cultivate their own. Empaths, with their naturally open and generous energy fields, often become targets for this unconscious parasitism. The very people who resent the empath's light may simultaneously be dependent upon it for their own psychological equilibrium. This creates a perverse relationship dynamic where the empath becomes both sustenance and scapegoat. Their energy is consumed while their person is criticized, and their light is absorbed while their character is diminished. They find themselves in relationships where they are simultaneously indispensable and devalued, needed, and resented. Soul fatigue and the collective awakening. The psychological cost of such dynamics for empaths can be enormous. They may begin to experience what I call soul fatigue. a deep exhaustion that comes not from physical exertion, but from constantly giving of their essence while receiving subtle hostility in return. They may develop what appears to be depression, but is actually a natural response to chronic emotional invalidation and energetic depletion. Many empaths find themselves caught in cycles of self-doubt, questioning whether their perceptions are accurate, whether their sensitivity is indeed too much, whether their very nature is somehow flawed. This self-questioning represents the internalization of others' projections, the absorption of external criticism as internal truth. But there is another perspective to consider, one that reframes these challenging dynamics as part of a larger spiritual and psychological purpose. From this viewpoint, empaths serve a crucial function in the collective human psyche. They are the canaries in the coal mine of human consciousness, sensing and responding to emotional toxicity that others have learned to ignore or deny. Their sensitivity serves not only their own evolution, but also that of everyone they encounter. By refusing to pretend that superficial interactions are sufficient, by insisting through their very presence that depth and authenticity matter, they create opportunities for others to examine their own emotional lives, to question their own defensive strategies, to consider their own capacity for deeper connection. The resentment they attract, while painful, can be understood as a necessary friction in the process of collective awakening. When people feel uncomfortable in the presence of authentic emotion, that discomfort itself carries information about where healing is needed, where growth is possible, where transformation awaits, conscious empathy and radical self-loyalty. This does not mean that empaths should accept abuse or diminish themselves to accommodate others' discomfort. Rather, it suggests that understanding the deeper psychological dynamics at play can help empaths respond with wisdom rather than reactivity, with boundaries rather than walls, with compassion rather than enabling. The development of what I call conscious empathy becomes crucial for those who possess this gift. Conscious empathy involves maintaining awareness of one's own energy and boundaries while remaining open to authentic connection. It means recognizing when one is being asked to carry what rightfully belongs to another person. It means understanding the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their avoidance of responsibility. Conscious empaths learn to distinguish between their own emotions and those they absorb from others. They develop what we might call psychic hygiene, practices that allow them to cleanse themselves of energies that are not their own. They cultivate the ability to witness others' pain without immediately rushing to fix or absorb it. Perhaps most importantly, conscious empaths learn to honor their own emotional reality with the same care and attention they typically give to others. They recognize that their sensitivity is not a burden to be managed, but a gift to be cherished and protected. They understand that their depth of feeling is not a flaw to be corrected, but a treasure to be valued and shared wisely. The path of the conscious empath requires what I call radical self-loyalty, an unwavering commitment to one's own truth, values, and well-being. This does not mean becoming selfish or uncaring, but rather recognizing that authentic service to others must flow from a foundation of authentic relationship with oneself. boundaried authenticity and integration of the shadow. When empaths operate from this foundation of self-awareness and self-care, they become less susceptible to the projections and resentments of others. They can witness others' discomfort without taking responsibility for it. They can offer their gifts without depleting their essence. They can remain open without being invaded. Paradoxically, this boundaried authenticity often serves others more effectively than boundaryless giving. When empaths maintain their center while offering their presence, they model for others what healthy emotional functioning looks like. They demonstrate that it is possible to feel deeply without drowning, to care genuinely without losing oneself, to remain open without being vulnerable to every wind that blows. The resentment that empaths attract also serves an important diagnostic function, revealing where healing is most needed in their environment. Rather than taking such resentment personally, conscious empaths can learn to view it as information about the collective emotional health of their community, their workplace, their family system. This perspective transforms the empath from victim of others' projections to conscious participant in collective healing. They begin to understand their role not as savior or scapegoat, but as catalyst for authentic human connection. Their very presence invites others to examine their relationship with their own emotional truths, their own capacity for depth, their own willingness to risk genuine intimacy. The journey toward conscious empathy also involves what Jung called the integration of the shadow, recognizing and accepting the darker aspects of one's own nature. Even empaths carry shadow elements, perhaps a hidden superiority about their emotional sophistication, perhaps an unconscious addiction to being needed, perhaps a martyrdom complex that feeds on suffering. By acknowledging and integrating these shadow aspects, empaths become more whole and therefore more genuinely helpful to others. They stop emanating the subtle signals that attract dependent or resentful relationships, and they begin to draw people who are interested in genuine growth rather than emotional drainage or projection. The wounded healer archetype in balance. The ultimate goal is not to eliminate the challenges that come with being empathic, but to meet those challenges with increased consciousness and skill. The empath's journey involves learning to be simultaneously vulnerable and boundaried, open and discerning, caring and self-protective. This integration creates what we might call the wounded healer archetype in balance, someone who has transformed their own pain into wisdom and can offer that wisdom without sacrificing their own well-being. Such individuals become beacons of what is possible in human emotional development, living examples of how sensitivity can be strength rather than weakness. The world desperately needs individuals who can model emotional authenticity and depth. In a culture that often prizes emotional numbing, surface-level interaction, and defensive strategies, empaths serve as reminders of our deeper human capacity for connection, understanding, and love. The resentment they attract is often proportional to how much their presence is needed. In environments where authenticity has become rare, the appearance of genuine emotional presence can feel almost shocking, threatening to established patterns of superficial interaction and defended relating. Remember, shine brightly consciously. Rather than dimming the light to accommodate others' discomfort, Empaths are called to shine even more brightly while developing the wisdom to protect their flame. They must learn to stand in the truth with both courage and compassion, offering their gifts while maintaining their boundaries, serving others while honoring themselves. The path is not easy, but it is profoundly meaningful. Every empath who learns to navigate these dynamics consciously paves the way for others to do the same. They become pioneers in a new form of human relating, one based on authenticity rather than performance, depth rather than surface, truth rather than convenience. In the end, the resentment that empaths attract reveals far more about the psychological state of those who carry it than about the empaths themselves. It speaks to a collective hunger for authentic connection that has been suppressed beneath layers of social conditioning and emotional defense. The empath's gift to the world is not just their sensitivity, but their willingness to remain open in a defended world, to feel deeply in a numbed culture, to speak truth in environments that prefer comfortable lies. Their very existence is a form of resistance against the forces that would have us all retreat into emotional isolation and inauthenticity. For those who recognize themselves in this description, the invitation is clear. Continue to shine, but learn to do so consciously. Develop the skills and boundaries that allow you to offer your gifts without sacrificing your essence. Trust that your sensitivity is not a burden, but a blessing, not just for you, but for a world that desperately needs more authentic human connection. The resentment you may encounter is not a verdict against your worth, but a reflection of others' relationship with their own authenticity. Hold your light high, tend your inner fire carefully, and trust that your presence in the world serves a purpose far greater than you may realize. Your sensitivity is not too much. The world simply hasn't learned to appreciate its value. Your authenticity is not a flaw. It's a gift to everyone brave enough to receive it. Your depth is not a burden. It's a reminder of what human beings are capable of when we dare to feel, to connect, and to love without reservation. Continue the journey of conscious empathy, knowing that every step you take toward greater self-awareness and authentic living creates ripples of possibility for others to do the same. In a world hungry for real connection, your very existence is a form of hope